I'm Dan Berg. Join us as we explore the fascinating shipwrecks of the Northeast by diving Wreck Valley.
Welcome to Dive Wreck Valley. Today we're going to be diving with Captain Steve Bielenda and Captain Janet Beezer off the research vessel Wahoo. We're going to be visiting the wreck of the USS San Diego, a World War I armored cruiser sunk back in 1918. And we're going to attempt to recover some 50 caliber ammo shells. So stay with us. Dive Wreck Valley will be right back.
The charter dive boat Wahoo is a 55-foot custom dive vessel that's owned by Captain Steve Bielenda and operated by Captain Janet Beezer. The Wahoo is docked in Capt Boat Basin and runs out of Fire Island Inlet on Long Island's South Shore. From here, Steve has a huge selection of wreck sites to choose from. The Wahoo runs daily wreck diving charters from April through November of each year and is frequented by many of the area's most advanced wreck divers. For further information on diving off the Wahoo, contact Captain Steve Bielenda at 516-928-3849. Working with me on today's show is my old friend Captain Steve Bielenda and our guest, Dick Long, president of Dewey Dry Suits in California. My dive partner and mate aboard the Wahoo, Captain Hank Garvin, Jim Caracase from the Scuba Shoppy, Captain Phil Galata, who runs the dive boat Southern Cross, and Captain Janet Beezer. As the sun begins to rise out of the east, Steve takes a moment to go over today's dive plan with Dick Long.
Now that we've planned it, we know what we're going to do is a 25-minute bottom time based on air, and you can extend it to 30 minutes. To give you an overview of where you're going to dive. We're going to set the hook at the stern end of the bilge keel. There's two holes here. Mel will go in. He'll set the hook over here. What you're going to do, then all you're going to do is move along the top of the hull. This is about 75 feet to 100 feet to the stern area here where the ammunition hole is. There's an outer coffer dam, but this used to be up straight like this, and now it's laying down. So when you go to drop in, you'll drop through a hatchway about the width of this door, but not quite as high. You're going to go in the doorway about 2.5 body lengths, 3 body lengths to your left is where the ammo has fallen out of the top and dropped down. There's a couple of cases, 3-inch 50 caliber shells and a single shell laying there. Danny will be inside filming you coming in, and Hank and you will go in. You'll tumble the cases over, pick up the shell, bring the shell out. Once you bring the shell out, hand it off to Joel and to John Griffith. You go back in and assist Hank bring the other 2 cases. The way to get the other 2 cases out, I know he knows, and I'm just going to explain to you, is he'll grab one end, you grab the other end, you can just walk them out. And if they get light enough, if you just lift the end, he'll be able to push it and tumble it. There are some holes in the deck, so you have to watch, drop it through. Then when it comes to the doorway, all you got to do is throw them out the doorway, and the guys will catch it. After that, you'll come out. Danny will come out behind you. He'll film you guys sending the shells up to the top. After that's done, everybody will give an okay signal. Check your hair and your time, and then Danny will take you for a tour around the stern, up through this area, and then he'll come back along this way. And if you notice, he has 2 6-inch guns here. He'll come along here, come to the 6-inch guns. When you get done filming and looking around seeing this stuff, he'll take you right up to the top here, and you should be right back at the anchoring spot. And we dive air at that time. So if you haven't got enough air, you haven't got enough time. So that's up to you. We don't follow the full thirds rule, but we're very conservative on how much air we want to come back with. If you feel uncomfortable any time that your air, or if Dan feels uncomfortable with his air, that's time to abort the dive, come back to the anchor line and come up. If in an emergency, you can't find the anchor line, Dan will have a lift bag and a reel. They'll send up a bag and you'll hang off that.
As we continue to cruise offshore, let's take a quick look at the history of the USS San Diego. The San Diego was originally launched as the California on April 28, 1904. She was 503 feet 11 inches long by 69 feet 7 inches wide and had a displacement of 13,680 tons. She served as part of Theodore Roosevelt's Great White Fleet and had a top speed of 22 knots. The warship's armament consisted of 18 3-inch guns, 14 6-inch guns, 4 8-inch guns, and 2 18-inch torpedo tubes. On September 1st, 1914, she was renamed San Diego and served as the flagship for our Pacific Fleet. On July 19, 1918, she was zigzagging as per war instructions on a course to New York. At 11:23 a.m., an ear-shattering explosion tore a huge hole in her port side amidships. The Diego had hit a mine laid by the German U-boat 156. Captain Christie immediately sounded submarine defense quarters, which involved a general alarm and the closing of all watertight doors. Soon after, 2 more explosions ripped through her hull. These secondary explosions were determined to be caused by the rupturing of one of her boilers and the ignition of her magazine. The ship immediately started to list to port. Officers and crew quickly went to their stations. Guns were fired from all sides of the warship at anything that was taken for a possible periscope. Her port side guns fired until they were awash. Her starboard guns fired until the list of the ship pointed them up into the sky. Under the impression that a submarine was surely in the area, the men stayed at their post until Captain Christie shouted the orders, "All hands abandon ship." The San Diego was the only major warship lost by the United States in World War I. The original casualty reports ranged from 30 to 40, but when the Navy finalized the death toll, the official count was only 6. Once we're on the site, it's finally time to jump in and go diving. Conditions today are picture perfect. The sea is calm and the water, although chilly, is crystal clear. Stay tuned. When Dive Wreck Valley returns, we'll be descending to this historic shipwreck. As we slowly descend, we realize that conditions are absolutely perfect today. Visibility must be at least 50 feet or better. We're anchored into the aft end of the starboard bilge keel, only a short distance from our entry point into the wreck. Mel Brenner, who mates aboard the Wahoo, set the hook today, and now leads the way towards the small arms ammunition room. Note the dive light that Mel has mounted to his hood. This head-mounted light works great. When working inside a wreck, it not only illuminates the area, but allows the diver to work with both hands. We'll be entering the wreck through a hatch that leads to the small arms ammunition room. This is the same area that we retrieved a copper gunpowder canister from almost 7 years ago. Inside this room, divers will quickly find themselves in a very silty and maze-like environment. Please remember that penetration into any overhead environment requires advanced training and experience. Without the proper skills and equipment, a diver could easily get lost inside this wreck's catacomb-like interior. At the forward bulkhead, we spot the first 50 caliber shells. These projectiles are usually packed 4 shells to a case, and divers can find not only full cases, but the occasional loose shell on the wreck. In the same area are rows of larger 6-inch projectiles, which have explosive heads and are something that we definitely do not want to tamper with. You will note that some of the 50 caliber shells have collapsed due to the increasing ambient pressure as the San Diego submerged and sank 75 years ago. Hank Garvin leads Dick Long into the ammo room. Our plan today is to work in teams. One group of divers will transport the shells from inside the wreck to the open cofferdam area directly outside the room, and others will rig and send the shells to the surface with lift bags. As Dick carefully transports the first brass shell out of the silty ammo room and towards the wreck's exterior, Mel is busy bringing others out from deeper inside the wreck. Hank and Dick then start the difficult task of moving a complete case to the hatch. These crates weigh about 80 pounds and are not only bulky, but divers have to be careful and navigate around open areas in the floor, where the floor is corroded and collapsed. If a crate were to fall through any of these openings, it would be a real job to retrieve it. Waiting at the door is Steve Bielenda, who quickly goes to work rigging the crate. The rigging must be secure, otherwise the artifact could break free and fall as it ascends. Steve is going to raise the artifact with a lift bag. He'll also use a nylon line from his dive reel as an upline, so the bag will not be able to float away in the current once it hits the surface. Please note that if and when a nylon line is used as an upline, that it's not biodegradable, and therefore should be removed from the site at the end of the day. This not only prevents problems with marine life getting caught, but also reduces the chances of a diver getting tangled. As the first lift bag rockets upwards towards the surface over 90 feet above, Billy Deans from Key West Divers in Florida is already bringing another case to the door. Steve gives him a hand, and together the heavy artifact is moved into the open cofferdam area, which is now being used as a staging area. Joel Silverstein from the Sub-Aqua Journal has also descended to the wreck and is helping Steve rig and lift the shells. It's always a good idea to know how much line is on your reel and from what depth you're sending the bag up from. As Joel's bag starts to ascend towards the surface, Joel realizes that there may not be enough line on his reel. But fortunately, the bag reaches the surface before the reel is ripped from Joel's hands. Billy continues to ferry shells from the wreck's interior. Note how he mounts his light to the top of his hand, allowing him to work unrestricted within the dark interior of the Diego's hull. Diver Steve McDougall enters the wreck to continue the work of recovering crates. He makes his way forward through the wreck's twisted debris to the room's forward bulkhead and quickly locates 2 crates of .50 caliber projectiles. Along with diver John Griffith, the two start the slow process of walking out another heavy crate containing 4 brass shells. Note that the visibility inside the wreck has reduced dramatically as the silt on both the floor and ceiling is disturbed by working divers. Moving one of these crates is no easy job, but before long the exit hatch is in sight. Once the crate is out of the wreck and rigged, the lift bag is inflated and it slowly starts its air-propelled trip to the surface. Steve McDougall is using a different style of upline. As his lift bag ascends, a Cecil line is spooled off a Jersey upreel. This Cecil line is biodegradable and will start to break down and disintegrate fairly quickly. Divers can therefore leave Cecil line on the wreck site, but if possible, it's always recommended to remove any lines on the next dive. John and Steve bring out one more crate from the wreck's interior. The two divers maneuver the heavy artifact through the hatch and start to rig it with a lift bag. There are still many .50 caliber projectiles inside the wreck, but due to our planned bottom time and the depth of the water, this will be the last bag we send to the surface today. So far, everything has gone without a glitch. As the last bag heads for the surface through the translucent blue Atlantic, we begin to navigate back towards the Wahoo's anchor. We always prefer to ascend up the anchor, thus avoiding the possibly long surface swim back to the boat. The San Diego sits intact yet upside down in 110 feet of water. Navigation on the wreck is fairly simple. Once a diver is familiar with the wreck's layout and distinguishing landmarks, navigation becomes almost second nature. We slowly start our ascent towards the surface and our first safety decompression stop. Hank shows us a hole that the sharp, ragged wreckage sliced right through the knee of his dry suit. Although cold from the influx of chilly seawater, Hank was lucky not to have cut his knee. We've been quite successful today and have sent up over 7 lift bags to the surface. The San Diego has always been one of the most productive artifact wrecks off Long Island. Divers have been recovering a huge assortment of brass and china for years, and today has been no exception. After our hang is completed, it's finally time to surface and board the Wahoo. On the way, Mel stops to take a closer look at a large jellyfish that's drifting by in the ocean's currents. Stay tuned. When Dive Wreck Valley returns, we'll be hoisting our artifacts aboard and taking a closer look at the .50 caliber projectiles.
Guess what we got here? We have a treasure.
You guys get out of the way, we can get the line.
This one has got the bends, or actually a squeeze.
Before we let the gas out, the left will blow off the head.
Two of them. Here we go. Right here.
As divers continue to surface and climb back aboard the Wahoo, it's time to retrieve our lift bags and get to work on the shell casings. Mel swims out and attaches a line to the first bag, which is floating less than 100 feet from the Wahoo. Hank then pulls the bag and shells back to the Wahoo. We were well prepared today and had a munitions expert aboard to help disarm the shells. Please do not ever toy with live ordnance unless you're qualified to do so. Many of the projectiles aboard the Diego are, for example, armor-piercing and should never be handled. Steve utilizes a small sledgehammer and chisel to separate the crates into single shell casings. Inside each casing of the projectile is a cardboard spacer used to create an airspace, a circular cardboard disc or stopper, and then a pellet-type propellant.
This is the propeller. It's either cordite.
Each shell also contains a packing tag, which gives the weight, date, location, and other pertinent information on the shell. In one day, our dive teams have retrieved a total of 32 shells. As Mel makes another trip to retrieve a lift bag, the work of emptying the shells and removing the paper packing tags continues. The shells, as well as these paper tags, will all make nice artifacts.
He's filled to about right here in the shell. From here to here, it's 24 pounds of propellant.
Yeah, that's right down the hole.
Here you go. Here's the paper. Here's the packing. Wet bowl, 1918. And here's Iona Island. Here's all the specs. Oh, excuse me, 4.24 pounds, not 24 pounds.
4.24.
Yeah, 4.24. And she moves at 2,700 feet per second. Primer ignition. Hollow inside. The head is all hollow, and she's full of sand. That's what they use to weight it.
Oh, it wasn't solid. It wasn't
No,
solid.
most of them are solid with just a little chamber in them. This one has got sand in it. That's what they use to weigh it up, to get it to the right weight.
As Dick Long and Captain Steve continue to empty the shell casings, let's now take a look at the events and controversy that took place immediately following this day of diving. As you can see, we only retrieved and returned to shore empty shell casings. However, one of Captain Steve's competitors called the Coast Guard, the bomb squad, TV news, and local newspapers and reported that we had brought back over 400 live bombs back into population. During its investigation, the Coast Guard put a security zone around the San Diego and had its cutter Bainbridge Island on station to keep any divers or fishermen from returning to the wreck site. In an effort to get the San Diego reopened to sport divers, Captain Steve took Coast Guard divers on a tour of the wreck. After this tour was completed and it was explained that we only brought empty shell casings back to shore and not live bombs, the Coast Guard reopened the wreck. But they had imposed the following regulations. Absolutely no ordnance of any size can be brought up from any wreck off our coast. According to Captain Steve, this means that because of a little petty politics, diving has received a lot of bad publicity, and local divers can no longer recover prized artifacts like ammo clips, gunpowder canisters, or these 50 caliber shell casings, even if they're empty. Let's now rejoin Steve aboard the Wahoo as the last of the shell casings is emptied.
May not be there.
Once all the shells are disarmed, they're hoisted aboard the Wahoo and we start to cruise towards shore. Who on board would realize the media attention and bad press these artifacts would soon attract? It's good visibility, productive days like these that make scuba diving such an exciting and dynamic sport. Even though we won't be able to retrieve any additional shell casings, all on board can already be heard planning for their next day of wreck diving adventure in an area known as Wreck Valley.
The first process in cleaning a shell or brass object, such as a shell casing as this, would be to tap off any of the heavy conglomerate that would be on it and let it dry off. Then you'd give it a bath in muriatic acid, and usually you don't want to let it soak too long in the muriatic acid. You want to dip it in and take it out, dip it in and take it out, and keep checking it and tapping it and get that all clean. Once you get all of the incrustation off of the brass from the muriatic acid, then you'd have to give it a water bath. And Arm & Hammer baking soda in the water bath will help neutralize any of the acid so that it doesn't leach into the metal itself and want to make it turn green. After you do that, dry it down very, very, very well, and then buff it. A lot of people want to use a wire wheel on it, but brass is such a soft metal, the wire wheel will actually damage and scratch the surface. But you can take a buffing machine with rouge and just buff it down, or you can even use regular car compound with a big hand buffing machine and buff it and get it down to a possible shine like this. I mean, you can get them into a real high gloss shine, and then you can just spray it with a clear coat of lacquer so that you can keep all the fingerprints and things off of it so that it'll stay and look like a real object to display in your den.
For further information on the shipwrecks off New York and New Jersey, pick up a copy of Dan Berg's Wreck Valley Volume 2 book at your local dive store. Or to learn about the skills of wreck diving, try Dan's how-to book titled Shipwreck Diving. To order a VHS copy of the Dive Wreck Valley show or a free color book catalog, call Aqua Explorers Inc. at 516-868-2658.